Hi there, I'm your host Clive Serkin, and welcome to the Unstuck podcast, where we're on a journey to help you get control of your work environment, get yourself unstuck, and perform to your full potential. Okay, so we're here today with the world-famous Jon Peppiatt, former chairman of BBH, which in my mind arguably is one of, if not the greatest agencies, if you look over time. In terms of its output. So, Pep, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to come chat with us today.
Absolute pleasure, Clive. Very, very good. We've spoken a few times in the last year or so, but not for a long time. There's been a big gap, so it's lovely to have a chat with you today.
We'll talk about that because I'm going to go down memory lane on two levels. But first of all, you spent I'm going to say close to 26 years at BBH, and you rose through the organization, ending up as the chairman. I'd love to talk a little bit about your career and how you thought about your career, how you managed your career to the degree that you managed your career, just in the context of like the theme of this podcast is Unstuck. And a big part of it is talking about how individuals and companies, but in this case, how an individual can approach their career in a way that they don't get stuck, that they're constantly learning and evolving. And clearly you've had a career, at least on the surface, that looks pretty damn good. So I'd love you to just sort of reflect back as a wise old man and share some of your wisdom.
Yeah, so I think like so many people, it was a bit of a happy accident. My dad was in banking, and academically, I had a brilliant time at school, but didn't do a huge amount of work. So I suddenly found myself at aged 18, not really knowing what I wanted to do. And a friend of a friend sort of had a chat with me, and he said, "Look, have you ever thought about advertising?" And I said, "Look, I love the ads, but I don't know anything about advertising." And so I went to see somebody who worked at CDP, Collett Dickinson Pierce, which in the 70s and 80s was the place, in the UK. And as soon as I walked into the office, I was like, hang on, this is incredible. I mean, there were people walking around in jeans and T-shirts. There were pool tables. There was even an agency bar. And my whole vision about work, which was putting on a pinstripe suit and having a briefcase and commuting, I suddenly thought, my God, I want a bit of this. And I got a 3-month gig in the post room, when there was post. And, broadly loved it from the second I started doing it. And, I was very, very excited and enthusiastic. And I guess that helped because, however menial the job required was, I'd be very happy to do it. And I think certainly in the UK, and I think around, whether it's film or TV or advertising, there is a well-worn route for sort of learning the job on the ground, and there was a route through production, and I'd spoken to a few people who'd done that. So, yeah, I started there, and I spent 8 years at CDP, probably the back end of its most successful period, but absolutely loved it, and ended up being the creative services director there. And then was sort of headhunted by BBH in 1995 to go and lead the sort of project management creative services piece at BBH. And yeah, as you said, I was there for 26 years, which is slightly terrifying. But did lots and lots of different jobs. And I remember over the years, people would quite often come to me when they've been offered another job and said, look, I don't know, I love BBH, but this is a great opportunity and this, that, everything else. And I would always say to them, look, change is good, And they said, well, what do you mean change is good, Pep? You've worked there for over 20 years. What's the change there? But I think my big thing, because I'd done so many different jobs, to your point, I've constantly felt I was doing something new. I was learning. So I almost feel my BBH 26 years was sort of probably cut up into about 5 or 6 different phases when I was doing different roles, which felt like, obviously I was at the same agency, but very much felt like different jobs. And I think we've got to keep learning. I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful for you, Clive, but, both of us have been around a while. We laugh that we're the veterans, but, even now, talking about what you're doing, I'm certainly changing a few things now. And I think the people that succeed are the people that never think they've cracked it, always looking at the next thing. I mean, not not so driven that I have a New Year's resolutions and objectives each year to achieve X, Y, and Z. You know, I'm not a sort of thrusting careerist, but to the same extent, you know, I was always had half an eye on the next thing, which I do think is important. I think.
Well, there's a part of it. It's like you doors show up if your eyes are open. Doors show up, and I know certainly reflecting my career, and I had not as long a career at one place, but I had a 17-year run at Leo, and doors would open, and if your eyes are open, you look at a door and you go, I'm going to go through that one, and you don't have to. In my view, I never really overthought them. I really asked myself a question like, is this a doorway I can go back through? If the answer was it's
Yeah,
a two-way doorway, then go through it. What the hell?
yeah.
And I
What's
don't
the
know if
worst
you
that can happen? Exactly.
right. The worst is going to happen. You're going to have an experience one way or the other, and that's going to be a learning thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think I talk to a lot of young people now, whether those are sort of friends of friends whose kids maybe looking at media and advertising, and is this a good career, and how do I get in it, and how do I project myself at interview, and all this sort of stuff. And it's so often used, this people thing, isn't it? People skills, and almost sometimes when people talk to me, what are your super skills or your strengths, and I know it is actually my ability to get on with people, but I do actually hate saying it because it seems such a cliche, doesn't it? Oh, my people skills are excellent. But no, I would just say to everyone, just go in, be your authentic self, but be enthusiastic. And that was the thing. I was a really positive person in any job I did, either at CDP or then at BBH. I wanted to have fun myself. And then I guess that creates an atmosphere where people, of course, you work hard and you're ambitious. You want the company to win and succeed. But I think if people are having a good time, I really do think that helps enormously. And you then create followership, and people go, oh, look, he's a good guy, and he's always really upbeat, and he's a really valuable member of the team. And so then to your point, when different opportunities come up, guess what? There's a good chance that they might come knocking on your door because, they think you're a good guy.
No doubt about it. I mean, I'll talk about my experience because you mentioned so I recall vividly when we met, and it was a long time ago. We had Leo had just made the investment in BBH. I was like head over heels delighted because BBH was this iconic agency, and so I was sent to London by the bosses to go and figure out the secret sauce, like what's going on over there. I remember the first day I was talking to people and Nigel, and and I kept hearing Pep this and Pep that, and you should Pep. So the next day I found Pep. And if I remember correctly, you were running creative ops then.
Yes.
And you explained to me the whole system there, but you used a term that I'll never forget, which actually, and that experience, by the way, was what led me to Screen Dragon. I'll talk about that in a while, but you used this term about creative discipline. And I'm pretty certain it was you who put that in my head. And it was in the context of, BBH had an incredible reputation for creativity, and not just crafting and creativity and ideas. And on the surface, people are like, well, creativity is anarchy, and the crazy do whatever the hell they want, blah blah blah. And you were very clear about great creative, and an environment of creativity is built on discipline. A lot of people listening to this podcast are people in creative ops agencies, internal client side agencies. I think it'd be really interesting for you to talk about this notion of creative discipline and how you guys applied it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it all started. Nigel, John, and John, and it depends on which one you speak to. We'll talk about. They wrote 10 sort of values and beliefs, which actually they then got set on this sort of metal frame, which was near reception, about the values and beliefs of the business and what they believed in. And I think it was the number 5. It was processes that liberate creativity. And I think if you do work in a creative industry, I think lots of agencies believe that fantastic creative output and a well-run business are sort of mutually exclusive. and that you've got all these incredible talents and they're just charging around the place, and suddenly some magic pops into their head, and there you've got it. It's a brilliant new idea for whatever brand or business that the brief was for. But I think, they understood, and I think we talked about just enough process, and we had a very strong project management department. Some people who've been around, either creative services or a traffic department or project management, that basically ran the sort of internal machine. And I think the thinking about it is coming up with brilliant, original, differentiated ideas is bloody difficult. That's why they get paid the good money, and that is the biggest thing that is going to drive success for your client's business, etc., coming up with some very, very different type of thinking, which sort of entertains or, uh, makes a mark on people looking at the work. And we said, look, we don't want them to worry about anything. And, we nanny coddled them a little bit, I think it's fair to say. But we basically ran their lives for them. And if they wanted to see people or they wanted to get some reference and everything else, we would go, no problem. We would go and get the reference. We would go and do this. They said, oh, there's this fantastic film called X, Y, and Z. You couldn't get a copy of it because I just think there's a scene apparently in there which might be something for the Levi script or whatever it would be. So, and when they had reviews, we would make sure it's all in their diary, and we'd warn them 2 days before and then a day before, you pop by, hey guys, hope's all right. Then we get copies of their work. We'd brief the studio to say, look, we might put some stuff together for a couple of hours tomorrow morning between 10 and 12 so the creatives look good in their review. And so, and the results were fantastic. And I think certainly creatives that came from other agencies, and I'm not going to name names because that wouldn't be appropriate, but they would go, oh my God, this is just amazing. Literally 50% of my stress has now gone because you guys are just doing that for us. So we are just literally coming in and got enough time and space to come up with as good ideas as they possibly could. And, it doesn't work for every business, but for BBH, it really, really worked. And that was, when we expanded out of the UK, we made sure not only the values and beliefs of which processes that liberate creativity was one of them, but we did believe in freeing up the creative department and design discipline and everything else from so much of the admin that they could focus solely on essentially the value they were going to add through the power of their ideas. But there was another thing. Ed Cartmel wrote a book about Disney and Pixar, didn't he? And I think, they talked about when they were creating film, they did have process ideas. They had a thing called the brain trust where the people working on the ideas would come in and they would set down, not dissimilar to a review. Even a business like, Pixar, so incredible that it is, they had some kind of process. And I think when it changed, the other thing we talked about was just enough process. Just enough process. You don't want to just walk around with clipboards and say, right, do this, do that. It is an idea business. There is creative. So you've got to get the right balance, and it can't be completely process driven because that sucks out a lot of the magic, I think. But what is just enough process to oil the wheels?
I couldn't agree with you. I mean, there's such an important thought in there, I was dead serious when I came out of that week in London at BBH when I first met you. That started my journey on creative ops and creative technology, which led me to Screen Dragon. And we talk at Screen Dragon about what differentiates us, and whether I'm obviously not 100% objective, but we have better technology on multiple levels, but that's really not what differentiates us. What differentiates us is this philosophy, which is not dissimilar to what you talk about, which is process that liberates, or just enough process, which is when you look at organizations, they introduce process and it's well-intentioned, but at some point it sort of flips and it becomes its own master, and it's sort of the process starts ruling versus serving. and we talk a lot at Screen Dragon about our process is about being invisible. Our technology is about being invisible, as in it should serve the outcome. And the minute you as an organization are spending more time managing the process and less time driving the outcome, you got a problem. And oftentimes that because the process becomes unwieldy, because it takes a life of its own. It's the tail that wags the dog. You have too many processes. You have too many technology platforms, and MacGyvering them together creates so much pain and work and hassle. And it's so important. And that for me is the definition of process friction. And that's when organizations become stuck. And it's hard to keep an eye on that. I mean, did you guys assess process? Did you periodically take a step back and go, is it helping or has it become a beast?
Yeah, definitely, and I think certainly in terms of quality control, we had a rigorous quality control, and Nigel Bogle and Sir John Hegg, they would talk about work going out without the appropriate sign off was a fireable offence. The challenge is, and I get that completely. The challenge is, as we got bigger and bigger, we created this massive bottleneck, and it was mainly John Hegarty who was the creative director on increasing numbers of bits of business, and it just wasn't sustainable for him to continue to sign it off. So we're going to go, look, we have to change this. It wasn't weakening it particularly, but we had to start delegating out of John and make sure there are other creative leaders that stepped up and took responsibility on some accounts. And John was reluctant, I think he would admit, because he still wanted to have sight on anything. But we made a little film for us to show him the challenges of getting him to sign off a piece of work. And I think I do remember there was one thing, and John wasn't actually playing himself, but I think we had another project manager who was sitting in the toilet, and all you could see was feet, and basically someone was coming in to try and get him to sign off a particular, whether it was an Audi poster or whatever it would be, I can't remember. And it would get put underneath the door, and the hands would appear, and he would look at it, and then it would be signed, and then it'd be pushed back. But what it did beautifully, in it with a little bit of humour, was to demonstrate: look, we can't follow you around all day getting you to sign stuff. We do have to start looking at a structure, to be fair, which just it wasn't all going into the bottleneck of the founders. And that was difficult because they are brilliant, brilliant people. And there was always a worry that you start pushing down within an organization. But of course, BBH had a brilliant succession plan and lots of stunning, world famous creatives that have come through that department, and they stepped up and worked alongside John on different bits of business. And I think, it did, then everything had to be faster. And then technology came in, and you're going, right, how do you utilize that? How do you allocate resource? There were lots of companies trying to sell me sort of bits of software or platforms where there'd be an algorithm where you can just plug in what brief it is and have lists of who's doing what. And it would then pop up that Clive and Pep should be the creative team that works on the next brief. And
It'd be a disaster.
It wouldn't be great. We'd have fun doing it.
Oh yeah.
But then of course you go, well, hang on, what about the human touch? I'm not sure they'd be right for that particular brief, and let's move things around. So, I think from an agency perspective, technology can definitely help, of course, and it can work out utilization, and you can identify where there is capacity across all departments, not just out of the creative department. But it still needs a human touch, I think, to sort of guide it. And, it might give you 70% of it and accelerate the process of going, look, who is broadly available? Then it needs a human being who knows and understands the different characteristics of the people involved who could work on a project to make sure you cast that.
Well, we keep asking ourselves, is our platform killing more work than it's creating? Is our platform allowing the humans to do human stuff in value creation? If the answer is no, then something's wrong, and we got to change the tool. But Pep, talk about. I mean, now you've had a credible career, chairman of BBH, and now you're on to the next chapter, which not retired. It's just retired from the stuff you don't want to do and doing the stuff you do want to do. And you've set up the Pep Room, a consultancy, and I'd love to talk about what you're doing there, what's the vision for that, what's the kind of work you're going to be doing, and the kind of clients. And like I'm pretty certain there are a lot of people who can benefit from the 26 years that you bring to the table.
Yeah, no, I hope so. I mean, the first thing to say is the name, because the agency were very kind. When I left, they sort of said lots of particularly nice things, which I was like, sure, you're talking about me. But then
They didn't call me. I would have filled it
yeah,
in.
yeah, they renamed one of the. We've got 5 sort of main meeting rooms at 60 Kingsley Street in London and Soho, in the UK office, and there is one room which is the more informal room, where you have sofas and soft chairs rather than the meeting room, more formal stuff. And they renamed that the Pep Room because I think certainly the last 10 or so years, as deputy chairman and chairman, a lot of my work was actually done sort of quietly behind the scenes. I mean, I did manage some creative relationships, but I was basically trying to help key department heads and members of the leadership team just to sort of find their way through problems. And, I guess I was almost the sort of chairman stroke coach, probably. So that's where the Pep Room. So there now is a Pep Room in 60 Kingsley Street, which I hope is being used. Well, I think now that we're back in the office, I do hope so. No, and initially it was just as a vehicle. If I was going to do some interesting projects, I should set up a formal consulting business. And so Pep Room Consulting, I think I set up literally about 3 or 4 weeks after I left BBH. And the first project, which was actually, and I must whisper this carefully, one of my favorites, which was a local English sparkling wine company that needed a new brand strategy and a marketing plan. And I was like, this is heaven. And I got a little sort of band of brothers and sisters, almost all of them ex-BBH at some stage. And we did a fantastic project for them.
You're getting paid in merch?
Well, cash and merch, but we did. I think the cash wasn't probably quite as good as it should have been. But no, look, we had a great time. But I think interestingly, that's almost me acting as a facilitator and bringing a freelance group of people, almost as if I was back at BBH, but I wasn't getting BBH people to sort a problem. I was getting a bunch of freelancers and consultants to sort a problem. So there is that bit of it, and I think I might do some stuff like that. But it's mainly sort of absolutely staying in advertising and media, which is the world that I know best, where I imagine my experience is most valuable, and basically looking to help individuals, teams, businesses, I guess, across 3 main bits. One is creative. How do you design processes that liberate creativity and don't get in the way? What is just enough process? That how do you create a business where the product and the output is as creative as it possibly can be? The other thing is commercial, of course. How do you effectively run your business? How do you resource it? How do you measure what's successful? What is your plan? And the third is cultural, which I think is so important now, particularly post the pandemic and COVID, where less people are in the office 5 days a week. How do you create that magic sense of, I don't know how really to describe it, but to make sure that your business has a strong culture and that people care about each other and there is a purpose to the business beyond making money, how people interact with each other, how much they'll manage people's careers and development. Because I think it's, I think, look, this is a difficult thing to say, isn't it? But, I think from purely a work perspective, there have been some great things that have accelerated because of the pandemic, and more flexible working is definitely one of those. But I do believe that most of the time at key moments, if you work in a creative business, you should be in the same place as the people you're working on a project with. I just believe it gets to better work and ideas shared and developed and conversations and collaborations, which you just don't have if 8 of the 10 team members are spending 4 days a week sitting at home. And
right. Well, it's interesting. I had a chat with one of my last week with another guest, and we've sort of, instead of saying should we be hybrid or should we be remote or should we be in the office, flip the question around and go, what's the optimal setup or combinations of setup to create the outcome that you're looking for? So it's not a binary
Yeah,
construct, and it's not the mastery is not away or at the office. The mastery is the outcome.
yeah. No, and I think that's really, really important. And if I hear another agency boss, making this great fanfare to say we've launched this new initiative, which is 2.3 or 4.2 or 4.1 or this or that, or you know, just do it. But understand things might change. You've got to be flexible, and within an organisation, what's right for and again, excuse the BBH references, but what's right for the Audi BBH team and what's right for the Tesco BBHT might be completely different things. So trying to create an umbrella view that this is how we're going to do it at this company, I think is dangerous. I think there's nothing wrong with setting up some principles, but I think, we've got to do that stuff. But what we need to talk about more is the work and the ideas, because I do think, if you did a word cloud of what agency leaders, and again, forgive the UK sort of bias, but obviously it's the market that I know best. I'm making this number up, but I'm feeling it's about 75% about who's in the office and who isn't, and what the working model is, and what's flexible and I just go, you've got to sort it out. Tell your staff, tell future talent that you're progressive and you want all types and you want a diverse and inclusive culture. Of course you do. And there is flexibility within roles. And yes, definitely. But I think we need to move on a little bit and just spend more time talking about the work. That doesn't mean you're not doing all the critically important stuff, but just remembering, agencies want to win business and do fantastic work, which are going to get consumers to buy your clients' products and services. And if you believe in creativity and differentiation, that's what you should be talking about the whole time.
Right. Keep your eye on the ball.
Industry, but that doesn't mean it really, and it's really important actually that doesn't mean all of the other stuff isn't massively important. I just think there needs to be a correction a little bit back towards talking about how agencies are able to get to the best possible work.
Makes total sense. Pep, we're getting close to time. Unfortunately, this is what happens when you're having fun. I got two more questions. One, very importantly, because I'm the Pep Room, and I'm really excited about the work you're going to do through that. But I know you have another job, which is, I think, assistant deputy shop hand assistant at a farm shop. Talk about that.
I am, yes. Well, actually, I've got good news to report is that I have been promoted. So yes, it's still unpaid, but I've been promoted. No, so yes, so in the middle of lockdown and before I actually stepped away from BBH, my wife and I decided to buy our local farm shop, which is about 1.5 miles from where we live. It's set on some watercress beds, and it's been around in our local community for a long time, but it had got a little bit tired and dusty because the people had run it for a long time, and I think they wanted to get some new young or youngish energy into it. And yeah, we've done it. And yes, you're right, I was unpaid intern, but I've now been promoted to the unpaid chairman and head of strategy.
There you go.
But I still do the bins, and I still get in the car now and again to pick up the cheese. So no, it's wonderful. And again, though, you're just trying to sell something. If you look at advertising and brands in our world, it's how do you talk about something, create the brand, get some communications, and make sure that the experience in the shop is great and positive and matches what you're saying on your social channels and everything else. So look, it's brilliant fun. But it is 99% my wife. In fact, even claiming 1% might be a bit
overreach.
No, we're doing it together, and it's great. It's great fun.
That's great. I'm definitely going to swing by at some point. Last question I ask this of everyone is, big part of endurance and impact is keeping your brain fresh. And as my son actually coined this phrase, spring cleaning your brain. And my question for you is, what do you do to spring clean your brain?
It's a very, very good question, and I probably should do it more. I think, and I've been asked this question a little bit, because our business has changed so much since you and I first started there. And, as an older guy in the media world, how do you stay relevant is a question. And I think there is ageism in advertising, which is absolutely fine. The first thing is to think you're about 25. And I don't say act as if you're 25 the whole time. But now and again, just, take the handbrake off and have some fun. But no, it's talking to people, isn't it? It's talking to young people, and I think there is a wonderful two-way thing. And I'm sure what you're doing and what I'm doing with Pep Room Consulting is we have picked up a few things over the years. And I think lots and lots of things change, but lots of things are enduring over time. So some values and beliefs and principles that we learnt about when we joined the business X numbers of years ago are still absolutely as relevant, if not more so. And actually, if you look at the values and beliefs that John and Nigel wrote about BBH, you are amazed. I mean, it's almost 40 years old. And I would go, bar maybe a couple, all still of them relevant. Are absolutely as relevant. But no, and I think the other thing is, don't be afraid to be ignorant. And ask, and you can say, I know this is a stupid question, but I just don't quite understand Bitcoin. Can some, whatever. And I still don't really understand Bitcoin, but you know what I mean? Ask the question and be open, and hopefully it's a lovely two-way dialogue. You spend time with some young people, they'll pick your brains, you pick their brains. And I think both would be much better on the back of it, would be my view.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're at time. Jon Peppiatt, Pep, former chairman of BBH, principal of the Pep Room, recently promoted stockist at the farm store.
Mm-hmm.
A dear friend. Thank you, sir. It was so much fun reconnecting and talking. I appreciate you making time.
Absolute pleasure, Clive. Really good to chat. And look, we'll speak soon, no doubt.
Amen. Thanks, mate.
All right.
This podcast was brought to you by Screen Dragon. We break down barriers, make work flow, and unlock talent. Visit ScreenDragon.com to see our software in action.